Maria? Hi, I'm Michael Scharf, the director of the Frederick Cox International Law Center, and together with my co-organizer, Maria Schonert, we are very pleased to have you all here today. We anticipate a huge crowd as the day goes on, but we thank you very much for being the early risers because you're in for a real treat with our keynote by Congressman Kucinich. To introduce Kucinich and kick things off, we'd like to introduce the head of state of our law school, Dean Bob Rawson. And Bob is somebody who's not unfamiliar to the world of international affairs, having done his work on what's the scholarship at Oxford? It's the Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford, I should know that, and having been a huge supporter of our international law program and coming to us from years as the managing partner at Jones Day. So to kick things off, please welcome the Dean of the Law School, Bob Rawson.
Thank you, Michael. It's my pleasure to join in welcoming all of you to this really extraordinary conference inspired by the 70th anniversary of the Katyń massacre. The Katyń Forest Massacre is one of the darkest chapters in human history, as we know. It involved the murder of some 22,000 Polish officers, prisoners of war, and members of the Polish leading elite by a single shot to the back of their heads. In other words, deliberate, cold-blooded executions. For years, the episode was subject to a massive cover-up. Initially, the Soviet Union blamed the Nazis for having performed it, claiming that it occurred in 1941 when the territory was under the control of the Germans. It was not until 1990 that the Russian government admitted that the executions actually took place in 1940 and were carried out by the Soviet secret police. In 1990, the Russian prosecutors launched a criminal investigation into the massacre, but the case was terminated in 2004, and it appeared that the tragedy would become a part of what we might describe as historical amnesia. Katyń has taken on a new significance, however, owing to the tragic crash last spring of an airplane carrying the President of Poland and 95 other high-level delegates who were heading to a commemorative ceremony to recognize the 70th anniversary of the massacre in Western Russia. In the months following the crash, the Russian government handed over to the Polish government 87 files of its investigations into the 1940 killings. With these events as a backdrop, in collaboration with the Libra Institute and several other co-sponsors, we at Case Western Reserve are pleased to host this two-day symposium in which 24 expert participants will review the history and facts behind the Katyń massacre, examine whether it rises to the level of genocide, and debate the consequences of such a finding. The conference will produce an expert's report to be published in our Journal of International Law, which will summarize the conclusions and make recommendations for next steps concerning accountability for the massacre. A highlight of the symposium will be the noon-hour keynote speech by Stephen Rapp, U.S. Ambassador at Large for War Crimes Issues and former Chief Prosecutor of the Special Court for Sierra Leone. The conference also features presentations by Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur and Congressman Dennis Kucinich, whom I will have the honor to introduce in just a moment. Other speakers include Polish and Russian prosecutors, former U.S. State Department and international organization officials, and leading academics in the field. This is our second major international law conference that we've held here at the school this year, following our program on lawfare in September. And next Friday, we are hosting a conference titled Divided Loyalties, Professional Standards and Military Duty, which I hope many of you will be able to come back and experience. Today's conference would not have been possible if not for the generous financial contributions of our co-sponsors. These sponsorships, as I list them, I hope you'll reflect on them because it represents the depth and the breadth of the kind of support that we were able to find for the content and the explorations that will occur during the course of the next 2 days. Our co-sponsors are the Ohio Humanities Council, a state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Polish Army Veterans Association, the Polish National Alliance, the Center for Slavic and East European Studies of The Ohio State University, the Crazy Siberia Foundation USA, the Society of Poles, the College of Arts and Sciences of the University of Akron, and the College of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences of Cleveland State University. In addition to our distinguished panelists, we have some special guests here today. If they're in the room, I'd like to take a moment to recognize them. First is Eugene Bach, the president of the Polish American Cultural Center. Is Mr. Bach here? Not yet, okay. Professor Witold Lukaszewski, representing the Crazy Siberia Foundation. Is the professor here? Not here? Okay. Well, one that I know is here, Gregory Sedlak, the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences of Cleveland State University. All right, thanks to all our sponsors and thanks to our special guests, whether present at the moment yet or not. All right, it's now my pleasure to turn to introducing Congressman Dennis Kucinich. Now, in many respects, the Congressman is as well known as anyone in our community and needs no lengthy introduction. But there are certain aspects of the Congressman's background that are relevant to what we are considering over the next 2 days. We know him because he served as our mayor and more recently 7 terms as one of our congressmen. But relevant to the topic of today's topic, he has been a tireless advocate for civil rights and human rights, and we know that that's true within our local community. But what you may not know is he has served as an official U.S. delegate to several diplomatic conferences and world summits, including on subjects such as climate change and sustainable development. Perhaps most importantly, and maybe I don't need to say much more than this to an audience here at Case Western Reserve, he is part of our academic family, having obtained his BA and his MA here at Case Western Reserve University. We are always glad to have him back on the campus, and it's my special pleasure to introduce Congressman Dennis Kucinich. Congressman.
Thank you very much, Bob, and I want to thank all of you for your participation. Witam was serdecznie. Welcome, and this conference here is so important because as the historical record of Katyń is developed, from this conference, I believe, will come an arguable case for presentation to a tribunal. This is so important because, as we know, history ends up being the testimony of the victors. And the victors in war are often more interested in getting their narrative out and refusing to recognize what happened during a period than they are in a full review of events. And so you have this disjuncture between the events as we know them and the refusal of both Russia and the United States to come clean as far as the historical record of Katyń. And that compounds the tragedy. Because if it is true, as the Bible says, that we shall know the truth and the truth shall set us free, we are not yet free from the disgrace to humanity that the events represented by the massacre at Katyń visited upon the world. We're not free from that. It may be true that bodies have been exhumed, but the truth still lies buried. And as we bring that truth forward for the whole world to see, you begin to set the stage for honest recitation of events and for the potential of reconciliation that can only be based on the truth. There is no reconciliation without truth. There is no possibility of being able to let the great souls who perished at Katyń be able to truly rest in peace, if not for our efforts to be able to bring to the attention of the world the events that affected their lives. And of course, those of us who love Poland understand that the massacre at Katyń was aimed at trying to eliminate the very idea of Poland. That it was aimed at trying to knock out not only the top officers, but intellectuals who carried with them the narrative of the Polish people. So this then raises the question of a connection to war crimes, which really are an attempt to exterminate a people and the memory of the people. How do we come from this condition where Russia has not yet come to a full atonement? How do we come to recognize the importance of the United States releasing all documents that are available from that time? The only way that we can do that is through this conference. That's the importance of your presence here today, because you give testimony to the, not just the lives of those who perished, but to the deep inhumanity. You give testimony to the importance of relying on structures of international law to create proper forums for the further working out of the crime and the crisis that Katyń still presents us to this day, because it is a moral crisis. Wars can end, but the moral calculus that really ends a war generally is worked out over generations of people, and we're now into the fourth generation of people who have who look back to Katyń as a marker in human history that has not yet been fully inscribed. And so I hope that this moment will give us an opportunity to show to our brothers and sisters in Russia the path towards atonement. And when you think of the word atonement, it is at one-ment. You break the word apart, it is an at one-ment. It's really coming together as one people, connecting with the, not just the heartache, but connecting with the basic humanity that only mutual recognition of crimes can be able to celebrate. We are, in this moment where we talk about Katyń, we are challenged not only to call forth our brothers and sisters in Russia to recognize fully what happened, beyond what Mr. Gorbachev said in 1990, to look for ways of atoning, to look for specific ways of achieving a forgiveness that is necessary. And then we have the chance to create a deeper meaning for peace, because peace is more than a piece of the grave. Peace has to come through mutual recognition of historical fact, and the attempt to nullify historical fact, the attempt to try to nullify the very idea of Poland, the attempt to wipe out those who were responsible as vessels of the knowledge of what Poland was, is, and can be. That needs to be answered, and that's what this conference is about. In reading the memos by Soviet Commander Lavrentiy Beria to Joseph Stalin, you're struck by the cold, mechanical bureaucraties rather, that shows no sense of humanity, speaks only in terms of enemies, evokes an outgroup for the purpose of dehumanizing and then legitimatizing massacre. Those documents are worth studying because they point the way to the necessity of reflection of the kind of rhetoric that still exists in our world that would try to separate one people from another. So we're challenged to clarify what happened at Katyń. Well, we're challenged to share with the world this historical fact and to bring it to appropriate tribunals. We're also mindful that Katyń in a sense, is a template for the attempt to annihilate historical truth and for the possibility of new massacres occurring. Yet, in this effort that you're bringing forth in this conference, you are forcing a recognition of truths that will be uncomfortable for some. But we all must work out those discomforts because we need to be made uncomfortable. We need to be shaken to our core about events that resulted in the massacre of, in this case, tens of thousands, but then across the world, in some cases, millions of innocent people. So what you're doing is important for the world. As a member of the United States Congress, I'm pledged to work on matters of truth and reconciliation. We have our own challenges in the United States with respect to our own policies in that regard. But our failure to properly account for the United States' role in permitting Katyń to go unchallenged and permitting Katyń to be buried, that's something that we have to deal with. And I will work with you in helping to bring before the Department of State the case for the recognition of Katyń as a matter of importance to the world. I also will work with you to bring to the appropriate tribunals the historical record of Katyń so that we can move on a path towards accountability, responsibility, and to work with you in contacting our brothers and sisters in the Russian government to explain to them the absolute necessity of coming to reconciliation over this. That we cannot permit successive generations of Russian leaders to set aside the historical record for one political reason or another. It's no longer sufficient. So this is the moment that we can come together as a community of intellectuals, of political leaders, of legal experts, to not just make the case for the recognition of the tragedy of Katyń, but to make the case that this is the moment where we can begin a new direction in the relationship between peoples, to recognize historical truth. And in that, we celebrate the potential and power of our own humanity to reconnect heart to heart, to go beyond the tragedies that have visited us and those who we have followed. So I thank you for all that you do to bring this moment forward. Michael, thank you for helping to put together this very important conference. And I pledge to you my willingness to work with you to advance the truth of Katyń and the necessity of achieving atonement and reconciliation. Thank you very much.